Hi everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with a Diablo 4 guide for how to level up your Barbarian and how to make sure you don't get stuck when the game ramps up in difficulty. Obviously the game is still in beta, so every single thing that I'm going to point to could change easily, but a lot of the basics will stay the same, and I suspect many of the things that are in place in the beta today will remain as well. We can plan ahead for a full launch, try to optimize and set ourselves for a really good start to get to the end game ASAP. So let's jump right in. Irashaimase! So I'll focus on two different areas for the build. One is survivability and one is damage output. As with all other ARPGs, you want to stack multiple sources of both, preferably multiplicative, in a really good build. So I'll show you an example. Let's start with survivability. In terms of survivability, you can do a few very simple things to boost it up significantly. For a very quick overview, Diablo 4 has basic skills which generate fury, 4 of them right here, flay, frenzy, bash, and lunging strike. It has core skills, 5 of them, defensive skills, 4 of them, with some passives as well, brawling skills, 4 right here, weapon mastery skills, just 3 of them right now, as well as your ultimate skills, 3 ultimate skills over here. And then once you reach the bottom of the skill tree, you get to choose one of these ultimate passives. Now in terms of the skill tree itself, if you're aiming to optimize your damage reduction, what you can do is just search damage reduction up at the top right with a keyword search, and that will isolate every single node and skill in the tree that has the words damage reduction. So for example, flay has this node over here that improves it and says when flay deals direct damage to an enemy, you gain 3% damage reduction and a bunch of thorns for 3 seconds. This stacks up to 4 times. So that's 12% damage reduction in total. And that's not a bad starting skill, just to give you a little bit of a boost of damage reduction together with some other DPS in terms of bleed, etc. And then there's Frenzy, which gives you 8% damage reduction for each stack of Frenzy you currently have. It can have up to a max of 3 stacks of Frenzy, so that's 24 damage reduction. This is incredible. To me, Combat Frenzy is my favorite skill. And I mean, I'm a little bit biased. I played Frenzy Barbarian in D2 for a very long time. But it actually synergizes really well with a lot of other skills. 24% damage reduction, however you look at it, is incredible. You really want to combo those basic skills up with this unique item power. Basic skills grant 25% damage reduction for 8 seconds. This is nuts. So every time you use a basic skill, you get that 25%. And if you're using Frenzy as well, that stacks with the 24%. Obviously not additively, but multiplicatively. And so it adds up quite nicely. And if you haven't played the beta and you don't know how these unique bonuses work, basically you can take that basic skills grant 25% damage reduction for 8 seconds bonus out of these pants and put it in any other pants that you want that are rare as well. So you can extract these legendary powers and then place them in other rares, or even replace a legendary item's power with another legendary aspect. So it's quite easy to get. As soon as you get this basic skills grant, the DR, you can place it in whichever item you find it most optimal. But yeah, this is phenomenal. You can also go to the occultist and check which item this bonus can be placed into. So you can extract this bonus and place it in an amulet instead of the pants, and that will increase its power by 50%. So that's even better. However, that amulet slot is quite useful, so this is one good option for it. I don't know, there will probably be other options as well. But if 25% gets multiplied by 50% straight up and becomes 37.5, I think there's a really good argument to make to place this into your amulet. So that's how you can get about 40% damage reduction very easily just by going up to an enemy and clicking Frenzy a couple times. There's always armor as well, which reduces physical damage taken by 35.4%, and then any other damage taken by 17%, half of that. But there isn't really much interactivity with armor so far up to level 25. There are very few items that can impact it. There's one legendary power. It's basically tied to your armor piece's item power. You can see I have 340 item power. That's 170 armor for the gloves. Now let's see which other nodes give us damage reduction. There's this one right here, which reduces damage from elites. This is quite useful, probably later on into the game, because you need those extra points for other purposes. And then there's this one as well. Your shout skills cause enemies to deal 16% less damage for 5 seconds. I think maxing out this one early on as well can be really potent. Another 24% damage reduction. So now you have 3 sources of 24% damage reduction. This one you cannot sustain at all times, unless you run, let's say, 2 shouts or something like that. But even just 1 shout, with this one you can see it's probably something like at least 20% uptime. There's one item that can help you give it even more uptime. Also, you can reduce its cooldown. But yeah, this is another good source of damage reduction. This node right here gives you 4% DR while berserking. If you are running a permanent berserking build, this one is a must-have node as well in my mind. You just have to make sure you can sustain berserking indefinitely. The build that I'm running currently doesn't have permanent berserking. It has berserking, but not at all times, so I'm not speccing into this. I did run a build, however, that was maintaining berserking indefinitely, utilizing double swings, furious double swing, where you can add 2 more seconds to berserking once you already have it. So in that case, make sure to run this one. Next, you have 2% distant damage reduction. This is not really significant, so don't worry about this node. And finally, there is this node right here. Increase the damage reduction gained while you have fortified by an additional 3%. And I'm going to talk about this fortified a little bit more. I'm running a fortified build right now, and the way it works is you generate fortify amounts. And then if at some point your fortify amount is greater than or equal to your life amount, you gain a damage reduction bonus. By default, that damage reduction is 10%. That default value of 10% DR is not insane to be warranting focusing into Fortify too much, but it's very easy to improve that 10% into something like 30, 40, 50%. So you can see here on level 25 character, I've upgraded it to 10 plus 21.7. 31.7% damage reduction is amazing considering how easy it is to get it at level 25 and how it can be bumped up to 30 or 40% later on. And so the way to get that damage reduction improved is through the sapphire gems. You can see armor, 4% damage reduction while fortified. And this is the crude version. Once you upgrade that, it becomes 5% damage reduction while fortified. And I have 2 of the 4%ers in my helm and chest, and 2 of the upgraded ones in my pants. And then on top of that, you can see the pants themselves have 4% damage reduction while fortified bonus. The chest has 2% damage reduction while fortified. Note that as this stat increases, additional bonuses become less effective though. So let's see how bad these diminishing returns are. If I just have the helmet, it's 4% DR. If I add another 6% from this chest piece, instead of 6, I get 9.7, so I get 5.7. So the diminishing returns are kicking in already. These pants should be giving me 14%. So that should bring me to 23.7 if without any diminishing returns. But instead it gives me 21.7. So that's how you get 30% DR fairly easily. It's super easy to take gems in and out of the sockets as well. So there's no commitment when you just socket a couple of these sapphires. As soon as you get an upgrade, you just do this and you get your sapphires back. 6 grand it costs, it looks like. Very cheap. 6 grand is like 4 rares at my level. You just sell 4 rares at the shop and you're good to go. Now, how do you generate fortified? Let's go back to the skill tree. And now instead of damage reduction keyword search, we do fortified keyword search. So here's one way to generate fortified is if you hit stunned enemies with bash, you get 5% of your life as fortify. Stunning enemies is not reliable against bosses. So I would not rely on this because you would struggle against bosses. Nothing in the core skills. And then in defensive skills, you have 2 options. Strategic Iron Skin gives you 9% base life. So 38 fortify. And then double this if you cast it at low life. However, this is not very significant. Rallying Cry gives you similar, but what's really good for Rallying Cry is that while it's active, you gain an additional 2% base life as Fortify each time you take or deal direct damage. This is a great way to max out your Fortify in a tough fight. If you just keep hitting with Frenzy, you'll easily get your max Fortify. But I'm not running Rallying Cry. I'm getting my Fortify through different means. So I'm getting some of it through War Cry, 28% right here. These are passives that give you more Fortify. This one is not great because, again, every time you take direct damage, this is not reliable against bosses that don't spawn a bunch of minions that hit you all the time. So I would not go for this. Instead, I would recommend utilizing this unique aspect. After swapping weapons 6 times, gain 84 Fortify. It will be less if it's in like rings instead of amulet, but this is a great way to just max out your Fortify fairly easily. You just have to make sure that the different skills that you're running with your Barbarian utilize different weapons. So, for example, Frenzy is bound on dual wielding. You cannot do anything other than dual wielding. So you have to make sure that for your core skill, you utilize something that doesn't necessarily dual wield. Ideally, I would love to use double swing, but that one dual wields as well. So here you can see that we're using Hammer of the Ancients, and it also requires a two-handed bludgeoning weapon. So there is no changing that. But for something like Charge, you can change which weapon you use with the middle mouse button. Change it to something that you're not going to be using very frequently so that it creates more weapon changes. Same thing with Deathblow. It can be used with any complete arsenal weapon, so you can change it around. So make sure you create a lot of weapon swapping to get this Fortify bonus, and so that you can leverage your damage reduction while fortified. And at that point, you have max Fortify against bosses, you have max Fortify in tough fights with lots of enemies, you'll have it at all times. Also, this swapping weapons 6 times to gain Fortify legendary aspect is very easy to acquire. Let me show you how. In my character, I unlocked it from this dungeon right here. And this is close to the starting area. So you can unlock this super early on and start attaching it to your rares so that you always have a source of Fortify. As long as your basic skill uses a different arsenal from your core skill, you will be swapping weapons quite a bit. And there's another bonus to having a lot of weapon swaps that benefits DPS as well. It's this legendary power right here. When you swap 10 times, your next attack will overpower and deal 68% increased overpower damage. This one's really good as well, but more on the DPS side, and I'll talk about that later. So you can combo things in that way where if you're speccing your build such that you're doing a lot of weapon swapping, if that can benefit both your DPS and your survivability, that's a well-optimized build. That's why we were running 2 legendary aspects that benefit both. And obviously you want to get as high resistance as possible, but that's super straightforward for all ARPGs, so I'm not going to put too much focus on that. I just wanted to talk about this specific Fortify bonus that is very unique to D4. And this Fortify amount, it seems to deteriorate over time. It doesn't seem like enemies damaging you decrease it. But anyway, if you get this aspect, you should easily sustain it at a very high amount. So those are the damage reduction tips I would give you. If you stack those few options of damage reduction, you'll have a much easier time getting to the end game. You can see I'm not even running any defensive skills just because of the setup that I have right now. And now let's talk about the damage side of the build. You can already see that we're basing it around swapping weapons. So this legendary aspect is perfect for the build. After swapping weapons 10 times, your next attack will overpower and deal a lot of extra overpower damage. And the way that overpower works is you have a 3% chance to proc it with any attack. And that 3% chance is not something you can improve with gear like critical strike chance. Critical strike chance, you can add 1% here, 2% here, and stack it up. But overpower chance, you can only trigger it with specific item effects like these legendary aspects. And then it deals a bonus damage equal to 50% plus whatever extras you've got. Overpower has great synergy with the build because if you read the description at the bottom, overpowering deals bonus damage based on the sum of your current life and fortified life. And we're running a fortified build. So this gives us a lot of bonus damage. So our DPS is tied to how often we can swap our weapons. And you can observe that weapon swap at the bottom. There's a little tooltip that tells you how many weapon swaps you're at with regards to this exact bonus. So when it gets to around 7 or 8, you can start timing your attack after this bonus becomes active to be your damage dealing attack and not frenzy. You don't want to be wasting your overpower on frenzy. So make sure it's either your core skill or something like death blow, and you deal a ton of damage. So we've got frenzy, and now which core skill synergizes best with this build and with frenzy? Double swing doesn't really work because it uses dual wielding weapons. Whirlwind doesn't work because it's small hits. We want large hits that get boosted by the overpower damage. And rend bleeding doesn't get enhanced by overpower damage either. So it's either Upheaval or Hammer of the Ancients. I think Hammer of the Ancients has slightly more synergy with the build because you can see it's up to a 30% increase in Fury gained. And I think Frenzy already has the highest Fury gain in the entire set of basic skills that we have because of this node right here. It generates 2 additional Fury. So increasing the Fury gain is super nice. And then it also has the synergy with overpowering right here. After overpowering with Hammer of the Ancients, you deal 30% more damage for 2.5 seconds. And that 30% more damage is applied to every skill, not just Hammer of the Ancients. Upheaval, on the other hand, has a little bit of stun chance, a good way to trigger berserking. However, if you're fighting a boss that doesn't spawn minions, like a Shava for example, this isn't going to trigger. So it's not perfect in my mind. And then it can get boosted up to 80% more damage as well. This node is nice, but at the rate that we generate Fury with Frenzy, you're going to be hitting a lot more often than once every 8 Frenzy hits. So I went with Hammer of the Ancients for those synergies, and you'll notice I had to spend a lot of points into it just so that we could skip the defensive skills and go directly into brawling skills. And here we need to choose a mobility skill between leap and charge. I tried both of them and I find charge to be better. It just applies vulnerable with this node. It stuns, and there's one item that can boost its damage significantly if you apply that legendary aspect. The bonus nodes on leap just don't seem as good to me, like especially these last two. 40 Fury and 50% slow just don't seem very good. And then we also went for Warcry for extra damage. It gives us a source of berserking, which is 25% extra damage and 15% move speed, and some Fortify for our Fortify build. In the weapon mastery, Rupture is only viable for bleed builds. Steel Grasp is viable for this build because it can apply both vulnerable and berserking for a short period. But I went for Death Blow just because the damage is really strong on it, and it gives berserking for 3 seconds. And finally, for ultimate skill, I tried all 3 of them, and it kind of feels like Iron Maelstrom should be really good for this build because it says on the second passive it gives you dealing direct damage to an enemy after swapping weapons reduces Iron Maelstrom's cooldown by 1 second. I thought surely this is the right ultimate for this build, but after trying it out, it really did not perform as well as Call of the Ancients. I feel like the damage numbers on Call of the Ancients are much higher. You can see 195% damage through Upheaval, and then they give attack speed and increased damage, Fury, stun. Call of the Ancients to me is the best one here. Wrath of the Berserker is also a decent option. It basically gives you a lot of berserking and a more powerful berserking after you spend a bunch of Fury on it. And then once you unlock the key passives, I think there are 2 viable ones. One is this one that improves your berserk if you can find a solid source of berserking permanently. And then the second one is Walking Arsenal. This one seems to be the more applicable one for this build, especially once you get used to the cycle of the build and how you should be timing each of the skills. It will be a massive damage boost. And now let me show you one more cool thing about searching for Overpower. This node right here increases your overpower damage quite a bit, and Bash also has some synergy with Overpower right here. So I think Bash is also a decent choice for this build because of this one. But I think Bash might be better later on in the game when your critical strike chance is more than just 5%. At level 25, realistically, I don't think you should be running Combat Bash. And in terms of itemization, all of your weapons can spawn with overpower damage. So you can see I'm getting plus 41% overpower damage from my sword, another 10 plus 10% from my one-hander right here, and another 19 from the base stats of this two-handed mace. Other items like rings can have overpower damage as well. Here's another 10. My overpower damage is 169%. So you get some ridiculous damage numbers with overpower if you can time them correctly. Now let's check out the build in action. When I swap weapons, I get this counter right here. Swap weapons 10 times to overpower. So you can see it go up as I fight enemies. I'm up to 5. And you always want to make sure that when you're at 9, you don't click Frenzy. If you click Frenzy, you're going to end up wasting that overpower damage, because the first hit of Frenzy is going to proc the 10th swap weapon. And then the second is going to end up using the overpower. Watch. See? 31 damage and 265 damage. So the overpower took the damage up like 8-fold, but it was wasted on Frenzy. So let's bring it up again to 10. And while we're farming our 10 stacks of weapon swaps, we can note the damage on our Hammer of the Ancients. So that's like 500 damage or so. So we're at 9 again. So if we click Death Blow and then back to Hammer of the Ancients, we should be proccing a very powerful Hammer of the Ancients. Here's the Death Blow. And here we go, 1500 damage Hammer of the Ancients. It 3x'd it. And that was without a very high Fortify. Let's try to get our Fortify max. So our Fortify is at 407 Fortify. Okay, so we have max Fortify. We pop that. We pop. Nah, he's gonna die. 5k, 6k damage. I guess that procced it somehow. But that's what I'm talking about. That was Death Blow. There it goes again, 2.5k damage. 5k damage. So yeah, ideally you want to proc it with Death Blow. That's when you get the most DPS out of it. So let's see here. 9 stacks, Death Blow, 5k damage. Alright, let's check out the boss fight. $10k damage to finish the fight off. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's it for the build guide, everybody. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. I'll keep posting more Diablo and Last Epoch content. Thanks for watching and take it easy. Gochiso sama deshita.